You mentioned the police there. Of course, they came from both the Met and British Transport in this particular instance. Announced this week they are going to be getting a pay rise, a cause for celebration amidst all the bad news that we've become so used to.
Well, it's not actually a pay rise in terms of it's less than inflation. So 1.75% is less than 2.9% inflation. So essentially, it's still a cut. And for 7 years, they've not had a pay rise. And we heard just last week that some of them were feeling quite despondent and down. And when you think about the work that they're doing, we need to make sure that we keep their spirits up because they're keeping us safe. And I think that's the most important thing, that we have to not just say that we appreciate them, but our actions needs to reflect that as well.
So based on that, we can assume that Labour is committing to above-inflation pay rises?
Labour is committed to scrapping the cap. We've said it, we've had it in our manifesto. It's not a new policy, it's a policy that's there and fully costed, and we've said it in our manifesto, and that's what if we were in government, that's what we would do. And I think the important thing is that Labour is a government in waiting. We're not yet in government. So all we can do is analyse the situation that we know, give a statement of intent to what a Labour government would look like and what a Labour government will feel like, and that's what we did. That's what we did for the general election in our manifesto.
You're attacking the government for, in effect, not going above that inflation rate, for delivering, you know, in real terms, a pay cut. So it's not an unfair assumption to think that the Labour Party would do something different. So, I mean,
you're quite right. We'll do something different.
But how much money have you actually committed to dealing with the issue of public sector pay then?
Well, as I said, the Labour Party, we are the government in waiting. So what we can do is say, this is what a Labour government will look like. This is what you can be guaranteed under a Labour government. That's our statement of intent as a government in waiting. So we've committed the £4 billion to ensuring that we would scrap the cap. It's been fact-checked time and time again. Everybody's fact-checked the figures, and the figures stand up. And I think the important thing is to sort of establish why is it that our government treats public servant workers the way that they do.
But £4 billion isn't enough to give the public sector an above inflation pay rise, though, is it?
Right. But we're not talking about above inflation pay rise.
You're criticising the government for not giving police officers an above inflation pay rise.
What they could do is they could give public sector workers and inflation pay rise. That's what they could do now if they had the political will to do it, and they're choosing not to do it. And that's the issue here. That's the problem here. The problem is that you say that you appreciate public sector workers, but really when it comes down to it, you don't deliver on what you're talking about. And that's what this government's
But aren't you both saying exactly the same thing? You're slightly divergent in terms of the figures, but you're saying it's bad that the government is, in essence, forcing a pay cut upon the public sector, but on your own figures, £4 billion a year wouldn't be enough for you to do anything other than offer them a real terms pay cut.
Look, £4 billion is enough to make sure that public sector workers, and remember, as I keep reiterating, we are a government in waiting. We're not the government. When we've got the books in front of us, we'll be able to then decipher what else we'd be able to deliver for public sector workers. But we need to see the figures and the books. But at the moment, we're not in government. We are the government in waiting.
So you're just guessing then, aren't you? Look, I mean, the IFS says that if you want to give a real terms pay rise to the public sector, it would be £7 billion a year minimum. So you don't have the money to do it, and you're shouting at the government because they don't have the money to do it.
No, I'm not shouting at the government. What I'm saying to the government is, you've got all this rhetoric in terms of what you're saying, but when it comes to delivering, you're not delivering at all for public sector workers, and public sector workers deserve better, and they deserve to be respected, and they deserve not to have a pay cut that they've had for the last 7 years, to be 20% worse off than they were in 2010. Our public sector workers deserve more than that.